you struggled a little bit with the name Government Motor Transport. It's a trading entity. We are looking to change the name of the entity itself, which will make it a bit easier for you next time. But it's a trading entity in the provincial government of the Western Cape in South Africa. And we're going to share a couple of slides just to describe the journey that we've been on, where we've applied futures thinking and really applied it and gotten our team in GMT to embrace this new culture in the organization. And in doing that, specifically focusing on shifting from a me thinking to a we thinking, both internally focusing as well as externally focusing on shifting from me to we. So just very quickly, who we are in terms of Government Motor Transport as the trading entity. We have a team of about 193 staff members. That's the number of posts that we have. We're responsible for a fleet of 5,600 vehicles, and we have 28 national and provincial departments as clients. Now, when we embarked on this journey, we said that we wanted to embrace a new culture. We came from a culture where it was top-down decision-making, focused on being more efficient and the best government motor transport. That, in fact, that was the vision statement of the entity at the time. And we wanted to move our culture to one that was more of wanting to be at the forefront of shaping the future of mobility in Africa. And I'm very glad to see Villani in this session, because he certainly also, we've had discussions, I've met him, a young dynamic man who I think also has got this mindset. So we started this journey in August 2019, before COVID. And we had a workshop, and even there, we started the journey, and the journey itself started with us embracing a new approach to a strategic planning session for a government entity. So at that workshop, at the strategy workshop, we had a diverse team, not just the top management of the organization, developing a new vision statement, a new mission statement, and then after the fact communicating it to the broader team. We called for volunteers from across the organization, all levels of the organization, and we asked, if you want to be part of this planning session, come along. We are going to really step out of our comfort zones as management, and if you prepare to step out of your comfort zone, then you are very welcome. We wanted to bring back creativity, bring back fun, and also use the opportunity to build a team around a common purpose that is bigger than GMT itself, bigger than the trading entity itself. So for all of us, this was the first time that we were actually being asked to draw again, certainly for myself, although I'm an engineer, I hadn't been drawing for years and years and years. And for us to be drawing people, drawing nature, drawing our understanding of mobility was, again, just taking us out of our comfort zone. And we used this innovation code, those name cards that you see also had, we'd gone through a process of called the innovation code, which talks about having all 4 archetypes in the room if you want to successfully innovate. Because people have got different approaches, different thinking, and it is exactly that combination of different ways of thinking that allowed us to come up with a product that we're all very, very proud of. So we had artists, engineers, athletes and sages in the room, all with different approaches, coming up with a new vision for our organization. So we defined what we call our massive transformative purpose, our North Star, that all of our staff in GMT, all of us, from myself as the Chief Director to our drivers in the organization, we all have taken this to heart. We all know this, we all understand it, and we ask ourselves when we do something, can this or will this contribute to achieving our massive transformative purpose? And if the answer is yes, we will pursue that. So those ideas that Abbas mentioned that we don't throw out, it's exactly because we ask ourselves, if that can contribute towards achieving our massive transformative purpose, then we will pursue it. And that is how we've tried to embed this new culture and this new approach for futures thinking in our trading entity. So this was a very interactive exercise. It was a fun exercise, and we came up with a massive transformative purpose, which reads innovative mobility solutions to co-create a better life for all. Each one of those words carefully chosen. We went through a process with everyone in the room, identifying and embracing each one of those words, innovative, the innovation part, and especially co-creation. To co-create a better life. And I'll come back to that particular concept of co-creating in our massive transformative purpose. In terms of moving from the me to we wanted to ensure that everyone in the organization actually embraced our massive transformative purpose. And we were very, very encouraged when we ran a survey in the organization to hear from all of the GMT team, the GMT family, whether the massive transformative purpose found resonance with them. And 95% of staff were either excited or they were just super excited about the new massive transformative purpose for GMT. Now, in moving from me to we, it can be infectious. And the entity, Government Motor Transport, is a trading entity within the broader Department of Transport and Public Works. And what was encouraging is that the Department of Transport and Public Works, our mother department in effect, then adopted the same approach that we took in the same venue where we had developed our massive transformative purpose. And the department itself then came up with its massive transformative purpose, being enabled communities leading dignified lives. And our head of department, Jackie Gooch, also an engineer by the way, has also embraced this way of thinking and the futures approach to how the department itself will seek to restore dignity in the lives of the communities that we are serving as government departments and public servants. Now, one of the futures tools that we used was backcasting. When we looked at taking the massive transformative purpose and unpacking it and developing 5 pillars on which we would build towards achieving that massive transformative purpose, the backcasting exercise allowed us to identify those 5 pillars being thought leadership in Africa, design thinking, collaboration, which is critical internally and externally with our clients, storytelling, which is part of what we're doing now, and of course service delivery to our clients as a trading entity, but also service delivery to the broader community in South Africa and Africa. So we set about wanting to co-create this new future that we felt we should and can have a hand in shaping. And that mind shift again within the entire organization, making people understand that yes, you can, as an admin officer in GMT, in the Western Cape government in South Africa, you can actually make an impact on the world. And getting people to understand that their contribution, however small they may think it is, can make that massive impact, has been a wonderful personal journey for me, certainly, to be a part of. So the task team that we established, we had called for volunteers, and after we developed the massive transformative purpose, we expanded that task team again from across the organization, and a number of workshops were held where we identified then the projects that we would drive over the 5-year period of our strategic plan towards achieving our massive transformative purpose. And that in itself, we got people to understand that these sessions are fun, that the contributions that they make in these sessions will ultimately find a way towards expression and implementation through our projects and our programs in GMT. And we adopted the approach of design thinking, putting our clients at the center of everything that we do. We've got in government across the world, we've got a number of wicked problems that we've got to deal with. And understanding that you have to understand the bigger picture in order for your project to make an impact on that bigger picture, for it to have a massive impact broader than just your particular project and achieving your project's specific outcomes. So again, we introduce formal design thinking training, futures thinking training. It was important for us not to just think about the tools. It was really more about not just the tools, but looking beyond the tools. It was about embedding a culture, a new culture in the organization where people understood their role and the bigger impact that they could have. Even our plans as government departments, we are required to have these statutory plans in place, an annual performance plan, an annual report, annual operations plan, all plans that are dictated by Treasury that each department, each entity must have. We pushed the boundaries a little bit. We adopted a new design for our thinking. And what was encouraging is just recently, my colleagues in other departments were saying, but your plans look nicer. Your plans actually tell a story that we want to read. It's not just a plan that's developed and put on a rack somewhere, on a shelf somewhere, and then it stays there for 5 years until the new strategy is developed. So even adopting that approach of developing documents that people want to read, so that they want to understand what it is that we are doing as an entity. Both our own staff, who had perhaps never seen the entity's strategic plan, now wanting to read this document that attracts their attention. And then, of course, lockdown happened. And I think with the approach that we took of futures thinking, of changing the culture in the organization, lockdown could well have derailed our journey. But in fact, the approach that we had taken strengthened us as an entity to play a bigger role than we would have or we could have played perhaps in the past. And we adopted the approach of saying, never let a good crisis go to waste. And what we did in the GMT, Government Motor Transport, as a fleet operating entity, was to realize that our culture change had been realized, or that it was being realized. We first looked at how we stayed in touch, because now with lockdown, everybody was working from home. Because we are a trading entity that provided vehicles for first responders like ambulances, provincial traffic vehicles, we still needed people to be at work at the front desks, and we needed everybody to stay in touch. We wanted to ensure that the cohesiveness as a team that was developed through this process that we had embarked on, that wasn't lost. So we set up a WhatsApp group. We started to develop weekly messages to staff, just to keep in touch, to say what was happening, what GMT was doing, what they are doing, communicating that to the rest of the GMT family. It started off with myself doing a weekly video, and again shifting from me to we, and not trying to sort of duck out of the responsibility, but bringing in more people to tell their stories, and listening to the we as the whole GMT, telling our individual stories as part of a whole. That was certainly also part of this journey of shifting from me to we, but staying in touch, communicating. So our contribution as a trading entity towards ending this pandemic was perhaps bigger than what it would have been before. We started to work with our clients, like the Department of Health, who needed to transport nurses to hospitals, who needed to transport patients or possible patients to isolation centers. And this is where the trading entity then stepped up and said, how can we co-create with you the solutions that you require? We spoke to our colleagues in public transport and said, how can we help you to bring the minibus taxi industry on board, an industry that was suffering greatly because there were no passengers to transport. So we used the technology that we were developing within GMT to the benefit of our clients, to co-create the solutions that were required to better serve our people. So really giving effect to our massive transformative purpose. We introduced regular sanitizing of our own vehicles and then broadened that to sanitizing the minibuses, the taxis that were transporting patients and nurses to isolation sites and so forth. In all of this, we recorded for our staff to see what it is that we were doing so that they could be part of the journey. It could very well have been that this was happening without our own team knowing. And it was extremely important for me to have everybody understand what GMT was doing so that the entire GMT team could stay in touch and feel a part of the journey as it was unfolding. We also introduced an electronic newsletter within GMT. Kubani, a gentleman on the top left, came up with a name, Siapambili, We Are Moving Forward. Again, just to stay in touch with our team, with the GMT family, for them to stay in touch also with management, with the entire entity, with the entire family, and also for our clients to understand what it is that we were doing and how we could collaborate with them going forward also. In adopting a futures approach, we also, as an entity, asked questions about what contribution we could make towards the planet, towards the environment, and South Africa's commitment towards reducing carbon emissions. And when we set about introducing electric vehicles into our fleet, we said that we have to adopt this futures approach. We have to adopt an approach of inclusivity, of co-creating. And again, here adopting the approach of moving from me to we, or from us to the bigger us, if I can use that term. Even with the branding of these vehicles, if you look at this, this is a BMW i3, the branding on those vehicles were designed not by a company, it was designed by our own staff. We ran a competition within GMT, and the 3 winners of the design competition at the bottom left were awarded, and they were part of the communication to our broader family in that week. When we looked at the electric vehicle strategy, we realized that we were not going to just buy electric vehicles and make the vehicles available as part of the fleet. We wanted to adopt this futures approach and an inclusive approach and identify how we as a trading entity were going to work with our client departments and identify their roles to co-create with us this ecosystem for electric vehicles. So looking at the infrastructure for charging, looking at the repurposing of batteries, looking at how South Africa and Africa could use the mineral resources that we have to position itself as a thought leader in this electric vehicle ecosystem. So adopting that approach of setting up South Africa and Africa as a thought leader flowed directly out of our massive transformative purpose with the approach of futures thinking being applied. So there were a number of lessons that we've learned through this journey that we've been on since 2019. What I'm very glad to say is that the level of excitement within the entity is still very high. We try to keep that up by having people understand what their roles are, not just what they must do, but why what they are doing will contribute towards the massive transformative purpose and the values and the priorities of government in South Africa. We learned the need to be citizen-centric, putting the citizen and our clients at the center of everything that we do. that leadership needs to create the space to get strong buy-in from top to bottom with ownership across the organization, that all of us needed to embrace the unknown and be comfortable with being uncomfortable. Having those projects like Abbas mentioned that make us uncomfortable and saying, hang on, let's not throw it out immediately. Let's just think about, in terms of a futures approach, how will this help us to position ourselves better for the future? And then again, what I said earlier on, it's not just about the tools, not just about the tools that we use as part of the process, the futures tools like the backcasting, the futures funnel, visualization. It's beyond that. It's about the culture that we embedded in the organization. And then lastly, for me, certainly, it's to trust our people in the organization and encourage them to brave. And I didn't make a mistake there. It's encourage them to brave, to be beyond brave, and to come up with ideas and be brave to put those ideas on the table. And perhaps, yes, if the idea is not going to find itself to fruition, but finding the courage to come forward with ideas. That environment is what we strive to create within this entity in GMT. And I think we've managed to achieve that. Like I said, the level of excitement certainly is there. I'm very proud of the management team in GMT and the broader GMT family, in that we've pulled together during this pandemic. We've stayed in touch. We've lost some of our own staff, and it has kept us on course. Our massive transformative purpose has kept us on course, and there's certainly an exciting future ahead for GMT, South Africa and Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yasir. I always get, I've heard the story a number of times, but I always get excited when I hear this story, and it's really fascinating to see the change that has happened at GMT over the last 2 years. So I think before we go to any question, maybe I could just ask you a question from my side, because Yasir tells the story quite well, or tells the story quite well of the GMT journey, but it's all about the organization. But I think let's talk about your own personal journey, because ultimately, when we started this, we said we don't want to make you a futurist. We don't want to make everyone in the organization futurist. But you, as the leader of the organization, you've really embraced this concept of futures. Tell us something about that personal journey of your embracing futures and how that has changed your outlook.
Oh, good question. Thanks, Abbas. I think it's about empowering myself, firstly, with the tools that we've used, but empowering myself on this personal journey, actually, that we've been on with GMT, and understanding my own role in how the work that we're doing in government can change the lives of people and can change the future. We can, in a small way perhaps, make a change to that big future. And when we set about on this journey to say, let's look beyond GMT, let's look at how we become thought leaders in Africa, how we position Africa for a brighter future in Africa. That to me has been it's been a wonderful personal journey for me. And I think in adopting that approach, when my managers see that I myself am opening myself up to learning new things, to embracing new things, to bold, they take courage in that. If I'm prepared to say, look, here's an idea, and come back and say, look, that was perhaps a mistake, I'm setting the example. For me, that personal journey certainly has been wonderful.
Yeah, it is really a personal journey of embracing it. Yeah.
And of course, for government employees have a bad rap. We get a bad rap, but having government employees in GMT take pride in the fact that they are government employees. take pride in the fact that the vast majority of employees in government are not corrupt or corruptible, and finding their voice as those officials, that to me also is very important.
Yeah. Now, I think this sort of futures approach for me speaks directly to what you just raised now with regard to the public and citizens' perception of government, and it's viewed in a certain way, and we know the trust level between citizens and government are at all-time low across the world, and so I really believe that this futures approach and methodology, like I say, starts to get your own people excited, and that excitement then flows down to the clients and flows down to citizens, and ultimately, futures approach and methodology can then make this global contribution to closing that gap between citizens and government. So, like I said, I'm super excited with the journey that GMT is on right now. And then one last question from my side. Again, we see all these exciting things happening within GMT, but it's obviously GMT is part of a broader government, not only in the provincial space, but also in the national space. What has been the response from other government departments or your sister departments in the province when they see what you're doing and when you start engaging with them with this new approach? What is their response been?
I think in a word, the word that comes to mind is perhaps refreshing, because I think when we adopted the approach of saying to our client departments and our sister departments in government that we want to co-create with you, that our MTP, our massive transformative purpose, actually speaks about co-creation. That willingness of our sister departments to say, okay, if you want to co-create, let's find that middle ground where we can co-create with you. And certainly with the lockdown, the opportunities for co-creation presented itself. And we were there making the technology that we had available in GMT available to our sister departments. The fact that they were open to co-creating with us, the fact that they saw a level of trust that we were not trying to infringe on their mandate, that we in fact were truly committed to co-creating and serving our people, our citizens. And they could see that in our massive transformative purpose and just this new culture in GMT. That to me was refreshing. It's very seldom that you find government departments with very specific mandates being open to collaboration. And that was another big thing. One of our 5 founding principles is finding opportunities for collaboration with sister departments across government.
Yeah, fantastic. I think, again, government obviously operates within this regulatory environment for necessary purposes, but it does then create the silo-based thinking, and so it's wonderful to hear that this sort of approach and methodology can break down those silos. I see there is a question. So what has been 3 of the most difficult challenges that you have faced during your journey, and how did you tackle them?
I think was it Mahmoud Asad who asked the question. Thank you very much for the question, Mahmoud. I think one of the big barriers that we faced was the mindset within government. Firstly, government organizations are ruled by mandates and governance or red tape. Red tape is governance. And very often, government departments are focused on getting a clean audit. Now, I must just mention, as a trading entity, we've had 9 successive clean audits. We still managed to innovate, but we still maintained our clean audit status. But that certainly was a challenge that, one of the 3 most difficult challenges that we faced, just the mindset of our own team opening themselves up to a new culture within the organization. And we adopted the approach of this inclusive approach by having people spending a lot of time in empowering people to overcome that particular challenge. And within the entity itself, the levels of entropy in the organization, this level of distrust between staff and management was of great concern to me. And I said that to Abbas when we discussed the strategic planning session. And that is exactly why we adopted the approach of inviting staff from all levels across the organization, not just management going into the strategic planning session. And constantly communicating with staff, constantly communicating with clients, what it is that we are doing and what it is that we would like to do with them to co-create, to collaborate with them. Of course, another big challenge that we faced was just the uncertainty that COVID-19 brought about. But again, going back to that one slide that we have in the presentation of not letting a good crisis go to waste, we adopted this futures thinking approach and said, look, the world of work is never going to be the same. So we saw this challenge of clients now massively reducing the number of kilometers that they were doing with our vehicles. And as a trading entity, I must just emphasize, as a trading entity, government motor transport has to cover its own cost. And I did mention we did make a small surplus of just $10 million in the last financial year. But a lot of that money is earmarked for the recapitalization of our fleet. So understanding that many government departments now have had their budgets cut, have had to reprioritize, have had to reduce their operational costs, including their expenditure on the service that we offer them. Again, the approach that we had taken and the new culture that we have in GMT is one where we look at the challenge and say, right, in the future, what will the new way of work be like? How do we position GMT over the next 3 years for that future? So we've said many people are not going to be buying cars. Many of the staff of our client departments would, when they collect one of our vehicles, would travel to the CBD, collect the vehicle, and then drive past their homes to the points where they have to go and do their work. So the approach that we've taken is to now explore how we make our vehicles more accessible to clients, not how we increase the number of kilometers. We're actually now working with clients to reduce their monthly bills that we charge them. So in that sense, looking at a challenge, not just from our perspective, but looking at the challenge for our clients and making them understand that, in fact, we want to work with them in finding solutions that will be of benefit to everyone.
Great. See, there's another question here. What are some ways to include different philosophies and thinking styles in co-creation? Usually we see the same kind of people coming together, creating siloed thinking. I think maybe I can just respond to this one quickly around, Yasir mentioned the innovation code that we used in some of the sessions. And basically what the innovation code says is that if you want to innovate and do something differently and create this different future, you actually need different people with different ways of thinking in the room. Because if you don't have those different people who's going to challenge you, you'll just continue doing the same thing. And so the archetypes that you mentioned, you've got the engineer, the artist, the sage, and you actually need conflict between them, because in the conflict, that's where you will find the innovation. And so what we do when we do strat sessions and when we do these creative sessions, we make sure that there are people in the room with opposing views and across demographics as well. It's a very important part of innovation, and you can Google innovation code. It's part of the competing values framework, but it's a very simplified version of it, and it works very well if you are interested in taking your own team through a really co-creation innovation exercise. I'm not sure if there's anybody who wants to unmute or raise their hand and ask a question. Anybody want to?
Well, I mean, I just put something in there, so I'll unmute and hopefully others will follow. But really, it's really incredible to see you talk about, as a leader in a government entity, really championing the fact that, this is new for you as well. and learning is for everyone at every level. I think that's really amazing because that's certainly something we see a lot of government struggle with, not just governments, but institutions and organizations, really not embrace. So that's fabulous. I guess I'm curious to know what's next. What are you and the team looking forward to doing? Where is this going? What's exciting you?
I think for us, positioning GMT for the future and constantly reinventing the future that we would like to see. That certainly is what we would want to embed within GMT. Right now for us, a very exciting initiative, of course, is just introducing and embracing electric vehicles. By 2030, the whole mobility ecosystem is going to be very different to what it is now. And very often, Africa would have been a how can I call it, a dumping ground of technology that the rest of the world has moved on from. And for us as GMT, it's about the next step would be how do we position GMT for this future that is almost upon us, and looking even beyond that. We developed a 5-year strategy, but not limiting ourselves to 5 years, not limiting our thinking to 5 years, expanding our thinking to 20, 30 years from now, and asking ourselves the question, how do we position GMT for that future, but also how do we enable and collaborate with our client departments to provide them with mobility solutions so that they can perform and fulfill their individual mandates to better serve the citizens of our country and of Africa as a whole. So for me, that we're very new on this journey. We started in 2019. The next steps for me will always be firstly to maintain this level of excitement in what lies ahead, in delivering against our strategy, finding the tools to ensure that we deliver constantly towards achieving our massive transformative purpose. Because at the end of the day, this cannot just be a theoretical exercise. It has to be one where we as a trading entity and as government departments deliver to our people. So embedding futures thinking, but also delivering through solid project management approaches to deliver to our citizens.
Thank you so much. We're actually just at time. So I want to maybe suggest, I don't think there's any other questions that have popped in. Actually, there's one question. Do you want to take that? It's coming in from Dr. Jerry.
Great point about the perception of government and how
Yes.
futures approaching can bring government and citizens closer via massive transformative purpose that is focused on
yes.
co-creation, service, and dignity. Did you encounter any pushback to or resistance against the approach? How did you manage this?
Certainly, I won't say it was pushback. I think it was perhaps skepticism from some of our client departments. And again, it is where you have to break down the mental barriers where people still have this approach that this is my department's mandate. Why do you want to get involved? But I think as soon as you have our team meeting with their teams and forming one team for the citizens, and everybody understanding that the approach that we've taken in our organization is one that is committed to co-creating, to collaboration, and not wanting to take credit for your mandate, but co-creating with you and your department so that you can better deliver your mandate. So there was a bit of pushback, but I think as soon as people understood that our commitment is to co-creating, to collaboration, that those barriers very, very quickly fall away. And I think, again, it comes back to how the team in GMT has been empowered to communicate the massive transformative purpose to our clients. We have what we call client liaison officers who engage with our clients on a regular basis, who communicate to them what our massive transformative purpose is, so that they understand what our approach is and how we can assist them as a trading entity with the services that we offer, moving from just providing them a car to a mobility solution that's tailored to their specific needs in line with their mandates to deliver to the citizens.
So I think also just to add to that, Dr. Njeri, I think that, so Yasir speaking specifically with regard to clients, but I think from a governmental perspective, it takes brave leadership, and as a chief director, he's been able to do the things he's done because the HOD, the head of department, has created that space. So the HOD basically has bought into the concept of going on this journey of embedding futures into the department. And when she gave GMT the space to go and do this 2 years ago, we didn't know what the outcome was going to be. We didn't know we'll end up with saying, here is an electric vehicle strategy for the province, driven from a entity that's supposed to do fleet management. This entity that's doing fleet management has now produced the EV strategy for the whole provincial government. This is huge. And so we didn't know this 2 years ago, but it is that brave leadership to say, I'm giving you space to go and do that. And I think likewise at the director, at the level that Yasir sits, he's been brave enough to create that space for his own people. And so his own people have grown in leaps and bounds over the last 2 years because that space has been created for people to be creative, to put new ideas on the table, to put new ideas, to prototype things. And so that has allowed us to really do exciting stuff. And so that future that we talk about almost becomes tangible. And people get excited about it because they can feel that they are making a contribution to that future. So I think a lot of it has to do with brave leadership to overcome those obstacles that you're talking about, Njeri.
Thank you so much. And I think if anything, you ended that session on such an incredible note, because the point is, by taking on future thinking, you've actually opened up possibilities for a department that far surpasses maybe even what members who work there might have imagined their role to be. So you've taken it from something to actually quite leaps and bounds. And so that's only showing us that actually the next chapters might actually take GMT into entirely different spaces of work, which is actually really, really exciting. Thank you for sharing this experiment for the last 2 years and your sort of leadership in making this happen. Really, I truly commend you, because I think in a government environment, there's many, many mental and technical challenges that would have potentially prohibited you from doing this. So thanks so much.